Good morning, my name is Bando and this is Brexit Bando, and today I'm taking a break from the Horus Heresy. Yeah. I'm a little bit sick and tired of it, to be honest. It's just a bit too much. You know when you eat too much chocolate and you're like, bleh. That's me with the Heresy. I've seen too many Primaris Marines and Rainbow Contemptor Dreadnoughts, so I'm just taking a break today. And today I'm going to be talking about a different game. A game that came from the minds that brought you 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000. The wonderful minds of Alessio Cavatore and Rick Priestley. Now, for those of you who are probably rapidly approaching your first prostate exam like I am, you have, or will recognise the names Alessio Cavatore and Rick Priestley as classic Games Workshop employees. These guys were some of the driving forces behind kind of what I feel is like the golden age of Warhammer. And Alessio and Rick went off to found a new company, still in Nottingham, called Warlord Games. And Warlord Games is, personally, I believe, Games Workshop's biggest competitor, because they're one of the only wargaming companies out there that is pumping out plastic models in the same sort of numbers, or number of kits, basically, as Games Workshop. And they're also the only ones out there with a high street presence. Not many wargaming companies can say that. Not many war games really have their boxes on the shelves in board game shops, in hobby shops, to the extent that Games Workshop does. Like, you go into a third-party FLGS and you'll see Warhammer everywhere. And you'll see D&D miniatures, and you'll see board games, but you won't really see Infinity, you won't see Drop Zone Commander, you won't see that. You might see things like Marvel Crisis Core, but that's, they're quite a small one. But Warlord Games products you're going to see, and you're going to see a lot of them, because Warlord do all sorts of historical wargaming. They do sort of ancient battles from sort of the Dark Ages, and the sort of, ancient history of sort of like ancient Greece and stuff, or, up through to sort of, what was it called? The Crimean War, that sort of thing, the Napoleonic Wars. And then we get to pretty much the bread and butter for Warlord, which is called Bolt Action, which is a Second World War 28mm skirmish game. And it plays very similar to 3rd edition 40k. It's a wonderful game. It's one of my favourite tabletop games to play. I find it very easy to play. And unlike 40k, I don't find myself getting bored by like turn 2. Because it doesn't work in the same way as 40k, in that I go, then you go, then I go, then you go. No, it uses order dice. And for every unit in your army, you get 1 order dice. And an order dice is just a d6, and it has all these different things that your units can do. And now, every unit can do the same things. And these are like move, run, shoot, those sorts of things. And what you do is you put all of these into a bag, and your opponent puts them all into a bag. And then without looking, you take turns. I'll pick 1 dice. And if it's my dice, I can activate a unit and I can move. I can do anything. I can do whatever the dice says. So I can move, I can shoot, I can run, I could try and, rally my troops, that sort of thing. But if I pull my opponent's dice, well, I have to give it to him so he can do it. And it's completely feasible for, me to pull 12 dice from the bag and pull 12 of my opponent's dice from the bag and sit there while they just go off and do everything. But the upside is that once they've done that, I'm given complete control over what I do when it's my turn. And it's getting all your dice in one go might seem like it's a huge advantage, but it really isn't. Because you can't retaliate. You can't go, oh great, he's moved this unit out of cover, so now I can get him. You can't, because your unit's already done whatever it was going to do. And one of the things that this game does is everything shoots the same. Everything hits on, I think it's a 3+. And you have 3 levels to a unit. And a unit can be inexperienced, I think it's regular, and veteran, basically. And if it's inexperienced, I think you get -1 to hit. If you're regular, I think you don't get anything, and if you're a veteran, you get +1 to hit. And then everything else gives you +1 or -1 to hit. So, if you're shooting over a certain range, it's a minus to hit. If you're shooting in your optimal range, it's a +1 to hit. If you're shooting through cover, it could be a minus to hit. So very quickly, you could have these guys who are going to be, really accurate, really great, but because they've moved, the enemy's moved, they're shooting through cover, it's a really difficult shot to make. And I really like that. It does mean you sit there counting on your fingers quite regularly each time you shoot, just to figure out what it is. But it's really... I find it faster. I find it more fun. I don't have to memorise tables. That is something I absolutely despise from Games Workshop, is memorising things like wounding tables and all that. To hit modifiers with, this is a AP2, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nah, brain's turning off already. And what this does is it makes you think about the terrain. And bolt action games, the tables are amazing. Even the most basic bolt action game I've played, and my local games club is not, the fanciest. We use relatively cheap terrain. You will see a lot more of it on the table than a Games Workshop game of 40k or 30k. I'll throw some up on screen because, I've walked past guys playing 40k at my local club, and I'm like, where's the terrain? You guys are literally just lining two forces up with one plastic building in the middle, and you're rolling dice. Save yourself some money and just roll dice against each other. But then, with bolt action, you're seeing guys where they've built an entire little hamlet, and you've got this tiger that's holding the main road straight down the middle. And nothing can go down there. And there's this brutal firefight happening through the gardens of these little houses at the back, and the troops have got to choose whether they're going to keep firing at the enemy, or they're going to try and jump over the fences and the hedgerows to get closer and closer. Can the anti-tank team get close enough to hit that tiger in a spot where they can actually do some damage? And it's very cinematic to me. I do like it. It's great fun. And being a historical war game, obviously, it does have certain kind of rivet counter and button counter types attracted to it, but it's a little bit more relaxed in most scenes. There is the joke of the what colour should you paint your Germans, and it's 50 Shades of Feldgrau, which is field grey, which is the colour of the German uniforms, which historically were any number of shades of grey as different dyes and supplies came available and went, stopped being available. And you'll always find someone who will have a go at you because you've used the wrong shade of brown on your tank, or you've used a red primer where you should have used a grey primer because this factory was the only factory that used it. And you can just look at these people and just go, because at the end of the day, these aren't display models. This isn't a 148 Tamiya kit with £300 of extras put onto it, and you haven't spent 6 months painting and researching it, and you're recreating a tank from a single photograph sort of thing, and that someone has tracked through its entire lifespan in Normandy. And believe me, there are people like that out there, and if that's the hobby you want to be in and the fun you get from it, power to you. But that's not me. I also am well aware of the irony of me being a relatively, gatekeeper when it comes to the Heresy, but I'm not that bad. If I was, I wouldn't have created my Marine army. But let's talk about this. So there are different factions. Obviously, you've got all the different nations that fought in the Second World War, and a lot of them have armies. But the big ones are Germany, America, the UK, the Commonwealth, we'll say, because they do represent most of the nations, and Russia, and Italy. Those are the big ones. I've missed Japan. Whoops. Japan is awful. I hate playing Japan. They have this horrible broken rule that lets them charge, and they get guys with anti-tank mines on the end of spears, and they can take huge numbers of guys with just bamboo spears, and it's broken, and I hate it. The game is split kind of into... It's not by the rules, but by the community is split into sort of 3 categories, which is early war, mid-war, and late war. And an early war army generally will not fare too well against, say, a late war army. Which is ironic because my early war Polish army, which has a tank that's smaller than a jeep in it, has only ever won against a late war German army filled with heavy tanks and assault rifles, which is just hilarious to me. But let's look at some of the models. So, Warlord makes some of these fantastic plastic kits, and we'll start with the Germans because everybody loves to play as the bad guys. And the best part about these kits is what was so great about the Space Marine kits, is that they're all completely interchangeable. So you've got the Grenadier kit, which is filled with assault rifles and guys wearing Zeltbahns and Parkers. They've got camo on their helmets. They've got rolled up sleeves. They've got loads of grenades. They really look like a veteran infantry force. Well, then you've got things like the Winter Germans, who wear greatcoats, and they are more just like the regular infantry. Well, there's nothing stopping you from putting the camo helmets, on them, or giving them the assault rifles from the Grenadiers kit. Throwing some of the guys with the smocks in, because one of that exact same smock, while it was in different camo patterns, was also available in white. So you just paint it in white, and this guy isn't wearing a greatcoat, but he is wearing the reversible green and white camo smock. And I like this, I really do, and I think it's great. And it really brought back to me the old style of kit bashing that we had during 2nd and 3rd edition, where, I've got a metal model with his, one arm lifted up like this. Well, I'm going to hack that thing off, and I'm going to figure out how to get something different on there. Which is why when I did a Russian naval infantry army, and the Russian naval infantry from Warlord are a single box. It's about 12 models in there, and I had about 40 of them in the army, and I was not going to have 12 models repeated that many times. So I was clipping, metal arms off of bodies and filing them flat, and sculpting back on ammo bandoliers, and I was throwing in the arms from the German kits with the rolled up sleeves, and giving them things like PPSHs. Because you've got all this wonderful equipment, and it doesn't matter what it is. You could give them a really small carbine Mosin or a really long Mosin Nagant. It's all still just a rifle according to the rules. So. And it really allowed me the freedom of the kit bashing and modelling side of the hobby that I love so much. And then there's tanks. And as anyone who has ever been a 12-year-old kid will tell you, a 12-year-old boy, tanks are awesome. Tanks are so cool. And there are just so many of them. And Warlord they partnered with Artillery, who are a model-making company, who made a shrunk-down version of many of their kits. So they have a huge wave of plastic tanks. Things like Tigers and King Tigers. T-34s, Stugs, that sort of thing. And then they did their own resin models. And I actually prefer the resin ones because I don't like faffing around with plastic kits as much. A resin tank, which is literally about 4 pieces, is great for a gaming model. I slap the turret on, I put the barrel in the gun, I put some hatches in, and I used to have to stick the tracks on, like 1 piece on each side. Even those are now sometimes moulded onto the tank. I'm done. I prime it, I paint it, we're playing. It's wonderful. And it really... It's a nice break from science fiction. It's a nice break from these giant kits that Games Workshop make. And it's nice to be able to do something that's a little bit more realistic. And a little bit more grounded, almost. But if you are a player of 40k and you are not enjoying 9th edition, I strongly recommend picking up a copy of Bolt Action. Because the other thing is cost. Now, let's just quickly have a quick look at Warlord Games. So, here we go. A starter set for, pick one at random, or we'll just do the boxed game. Can I get it in English? Yes. So the starter set for Bolt Action is called Bando Brothers, and is obviously based on, the American paratroopers during D-Day, and it contains 36 infantry, 1 vehicle, and some terrain. So under £100, you've got a half track, a squad of German grenadiers, and 2 squads of American airborne for £83, and that's from Warlord themselves. You can knock another tenner off that, if not 20 quid off that, if you get it from a third party. Funny story. At one point, they did a deal which was called Wheels of Steel, and it meant if you bought 3 vehicles that were in the Wheels of Steel deal, I think they knocked 15% off. And that was great. Wonderful. Loved that. I bought so many tanks. I'm actually going to throw up a picture of my tank display wall as well at some point. But then because they're founded by ex-Games Workshop members, to try and get people who are in the hobby to kind of spread awareness of this, there are a couple of groups on Facebook for ex-Games Workshop employees, and they started putting out a discount code for ex-GW employees, which said, hey, get 50% off on a load of stuff, like a load of startups. Quite limited. It was 1 use only. But it stacked. It stacked with the 15 or 20% off for the Wheels of Steel. So I ended up buying, I think, 6 half tracks, and it worked out cheaper than buying, I think, 3 normally without any of the discounts, or with just the Wheels of Steel discount. It was sickening. I think it ended up costing me about the same as 2 half tracks. It was an obscene discount. It was great, and I know so many people who spent an absolute fortune on it. But the models are great. They're just, there's some real bad plastic kits out there for like historicals. There's no detail in them. The heads are weird sizes. They're all over the place. Let's have a look at another one. Here's a starter army for the Fallschirmjäger, the Sky Hunters or Parachute Regiment for the Germans. You have a tank, an anti-tank gun, a load of special weapons, a half track, and then 3 squads of paratroopers and a load of command staff and a mortar. It's £106. That's metal models in there. That's probably 2 plastic tanks, and a metal, or possibly resin. I think it's metal. Yeah, it's all metal. Anti-tank gun. You have a fully usable army. There's no sort of like messing around with it. They even write the army list on the side of the box. They just give it to you. And the best part is that this plastic kit can be used to make things like your special weapons, your HQ, your medic. And these boxes come with let's just get like because you buy a plastic box set from Games Workshop, buy Tactical Marines for example, and it's £40 nearly. It probably is £40 by now, and you get 10 of them, and it's 1 unit. If you're lucky, it's 1 unit. If you're unlucky from Games Workshop, they give you half a unit or 2/3 of a unit, or it's not multiple by the actual number you need, which is always nice of them. Your average infantry box for Bolt Action is 30 men and is about £35. That's 3 squads. And like Warhammer, you have your 2 troops and your minimum of 2 troops in an HQ. So for £35 you can buy an army, because you can build your 2 squads of 10, and then you can use those plastic parts to make an officer. You can make a forward artillery observer from one of them. You could make a sniper. You could make a medium machine gun team. And you've made like 6 units then from this one box, which is great. And you could put 5 of these infantry together with SMGs, MP40s, and make an engineer squad, which is another a different unit. So yeah, £35 for 30 models, and I would say they're easily equal to like the old Cadian kit. I'd say it's probably about the same level of detail, if not a bit more. The sprues are definitely more detailed than those now. They're more packed. If you are bored with Games Workshop, if you're bored with 40k, you're bored with Kill Team, just give it a go. Buy a £35 box. You don't even have to buy the rules. Just buy a £35 box and put together some models. And then, just as a break. But I really do strongly advise, go and have a look at the website. It's just warlordgames.com. They do all sorts of historical games. They even do some science fiction stuff. They do this. They do their own fantasy games called the Warlords of Erwin, which is kind of just sort of your traditional fantasy skirmish game. They had loads of. They did have a science fiction one, which was Gates of Antares, but I think they're putting that on hold for a bit. But they have a load of stuff that's licensed, like Doctor Who, Slain, Judge Dredd. A load of the 2000 AD comic stuff. And they have a Mythic Americas, which is all about like South American mythology, where all your armies are based off of those different sort of mythological creatures. So you can get things like Quetzalcoatl, the flying feathered serpent from Aztec myth, which is really cool. That's it's interesting. That's something different. That's not just your traditional fantasy tropes. That's something really cool. And then you got stuff like Black Powder, which is Napoleonic, anything with gunpowder in it. Basically, you could do Napoleonics, you can do American Civil War, Revolutionary War, that sort of cool things. So yeah, that's me. Just wanted to get away from Warhammer just for a little bit. Go check out Warlord Games, and don't be afraid to ask the guys you play with if they play other games. Give something else a go, because you never know, you might find something you really enjoy, and that's what this hobby is about. This hobby is not just Games Workshop. Wargaming is a huge hobby, and I strongly recommend that you go out there and you try and dip your toe into as much of it as possible, because I've never met a guy who plays this, like in this hobby, who wouldn't be willing to just give you a demo game of a game that they love. And you'll find stuff where guys love the most obscure game that no one else has heard of, and you might absolutely love it. Alright, my name's Bando, this is Brexit Bando. I'm going to go back to trying to build some scouts for 30k, because I have lots of them left over. Peace.